What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about the CZ P07, which is my everyday carry gun, why I like it, some things about it that I don't like, and I'm going to go over the general features of it. Okay, so I want to preface this video by saying that a lot of this is going to sound like complaints, but it just comes with owning a firearm and carrying it and shooting it for a long time that you're going to pick up on all the little idiosyncrasies of it and what you like and don't like. I really do enjoy this handgun, so I want to make that known from the start of the video. So I'm going to go over the things that I really like about it first. That way the rest of this video doesn't sound super negative. So first and foremost, it is dead nuts accurate. Whether it is standing from 7 yards and doing my warm-up drills, which have a 3-inch circle in the middle and just knocking the center out of that thing, or whether it's standing back at 20, 35, 40 yards and hitting those 8-inch steel plates and just knocking those down. I just am super confident with this thing. CZ makes great accurate firearms, and I can't say enough good things about it in terms of accuracy. The trigger is phenomenal. Again, it has that super smooth double action and very light single action trigger. Also, it just feels really comfortable in the hand. Now, I'm going to go over a couple of things in the video where I think it might need improvement, but for the most part, it just kind of fits like a glove. At least for me, it does. It's got a really good feel to it. It's not too big and bulky. I don't have my pinky overhanging. I don't have a magazine in here right now, so it looks like it a little bit. But trust me, it doesn't feel like a carry gun. It feels like a regular full-size gun. So it's comfortable. It's accurate. It is reliable. I think I've maybe had 1 or 2 bad primers that caused an issue. But outside of that, I've never had a failure to feed or failure to eject or anything like that. Straight from the factory, it also has the sights that I like, which is the classic 3-dot. Really not too much to say there. It's just a personal preference thing for me. It can be different for everybody, but you're not getting some garbage plastics sights on there from the factory. Also, the controls are usable. It doesn't have a tiny little slide release or a tiny little decocker that you can't hit. Everything, when your thumb touches it, you know you're on it. You know you're pressing down on it. It's not small. It's not like a little piece of sheet metal that's bent over. You know you're actuating it whenever you press on one of those controls. Also, big shout out to CZ, because when they shipped the magazines in the box, the mags came standard capacity, but also they included the 2 extended base plates, taking the capacity up to 17 rounds instead of 15. So again, hats off to CZ. That is fantastic. I know I've bought one of these before. Before I had this gun, I just had the P10. I think it was like 15 or 20 bucks for one of the base plates, and then a magazine is like 30. So you're really getting at least 40, 50 bucks worth of value in extra base plates. And if I didn't want to carry the larger magazines or the larger base plates, obviously it has the standard capacity ones in there, which is fantastic. There's not a lot of other manufacturers that are doing that for their consumers or for their buyers. Last but not least is the forward slide serrations. So this particular gun has a pretty small little slide that sits down inside the frame, and to have those forward slide serrations on there is just a huge plus in terms of making sure that you can get a grip on that slide whenever you go to charge the firearm. So starting off with the trigger, it has a double action, single action, and the gun is clear. So the double action for your first trigger pull is roughly, I would say 8.5, 9 pounds. This is one of the biggest features as to why I carry this gun, is I like the safety of that heavy double action pull for the first round. The single action is really light, comes in around 2.5, maybe 3 pounds. It's very light. This is a little different from my striker fire guns, where I could take a whole month off from shooting, pick up my P10, go out and just ring steel and kill my A-zone hits all day long. But with this P07 with the single double in it, I have to kind of like catch up to speed a little bit when I go out. So I try to shoot it at least once a month, twice a month if I can. I have to keep up with it every 2 weeks, get out and shoot a little bit, or else if I take too much time off, my hits start to get a little poorer. I'm not getting the accuracy that I need or that I feel comfortable with. All right, one of the things I want to mention is the slide on this firearm is a little stiff in my opinion. Compared to striker fire guns that I have, it's just a little bit stiffer. That lockup is a little stiffer. I think when it's resetting the hammer, obviously you notice a little bit more. But when I am shooting it, I've noticed it to be a little snappier, and I'm not sure if it's to do with the heavier recoil spring or what that is, but I definitely think that the slide is a little harder to rack, which may be attributing to a snappier shot. But I'm not sure, but that's just kind of what I've noticed from shooting it for the last year or so. Another thing, this is what they call slide inside frame. So as you can see here, the rail sits down inside the frame. Now what that does is bring the bore axis down lower so it's further into your hand to reduce that recoil. However, the downside of that is you have less purchase area on the slide to grab onto should you need to clear a malfunction or something of that nature, or just charge the gun. And also with these big bulky controls, what I've noticed is if I try to grab a handful of it from maybe up front or in the middle and I go to pull it back and I hit my fingers like on this ambidextrous decocker here, I'll hit my fingers and it'll just pull my hand away like that. So you got to be careful and get a good grip on it so that your fingers come across the top of the controls as opposed to being down here, because then you can't move anywhere. Now, right now the gun's got a little bit of lube on it, so it's actually a little bit difficult to rack it. But even with dry hands, I have noticed that it can be difficult to rack because that slide is a little bit lower into the frame, so there's less to grab onto. So I think that's something that I want to have addressed, is I want to look into potentially getting a different recoil spring, something to loosen that up a little bit, just to make it easier to work. Now, even though it is a little bit stiff, and if you have sweaty palms or something like that, it can be difficult to charge. I've noticed that it has been breaking in a little bit, so I'm going to give it a couple thousand rounds or so, and if it doesn't loosen up by then, I might think about putting a different recoil spring into it. I don't want to sacrifice reliability, and anytime you go changing internals and things of that nature, you do run the risk of changing the reliability of the gun. In terms of the ergonomics, I think in the CZ category, the P10 wins that. However, the P07 isn't bad. It's a little bit thicker in terms of the size of the frame. So it's a little bit more blocky. It's not as bad as a Glock, but I do notice that it is wider in the hand. So one thing I want to mention about ergonomics is that this slide release is a little bit of a stretch. Even with the thinner back strap, I have noticed that I have to change my grip up a little bit to depress that to get the slide to release. Now I know there's not much they can do because they have to have that decocker or safety button there. But again, it is a little bit far away, so that's something to keep in mind if you're thinking about this gun and you have smaller hands. I have to change my grip a little bit. There is the option, if you do have small hands, you could change your manual of arms. So as opposed to putting in a new magazine and then hitting the slide release with your dominant hand, you would switch up and use your support hand. So inserting your mag and then coming up and then hitting the slide release with your support hand. So another thing in terms of ergonomics is the grip texture. The lack thereof right here is kind of frustrating. This grip is great. Back strap's got some good grip. Right here's got some good grip. This is where I want grip. If I didn't have any texture down here, I wouldn't be nearly as upset as if I just had good texture here. The reason for that is when I'm gripping the firearm, some people call it the plier motion. I refer to it like breaking a wishbone. So if you think about breaking a wishbone, you're kind of breaking it like this. So when I'm holding the firearm, I'm trying to pinch in like this. So that's where I get a lot of my kind of grip on the gun to reduce recoil, is making sure that I'm pushing in like this, kind of flexing. You don't want your elbows way up like this, but I put a lot of pressure on this part of the gun on both sides. So now I know I could probably have it stippled or whatever, but coming from the factory, this gun just looks gorgeous, and I don't really want to mess it up because I love the looks of it. I saw one person that had theirs stippled that matched this, so I think I'm going to try to do that, although this is a raised texture. It's not a stippled texture that's like going into the frame of the gun. It's raised out. Definitely have somebody else do it, not me, even though I do stipple most of my own guns. But it looks beautiful from the factory, so I don't want to mess that up. But CZ, I really wish you would have put the grip where it matters, or at least in my opinion. So let's talk about the sights. They have the classic 3-dot sights on here. They are aluminum. They are night sights from the factory, which is awesome. There's a lot of manufacturers, well, at least one of them that I can think of that doesn't do that. And they're not tritium, so you do have to charge them up. But in my opinion, night sights, They're not as good as having a weapon light. This particular firearm I only carry during the day. I know that sounds weird, but I have a particular gun that I prefer to carry if I'm going to be going somewhere at night. Larger capacity, good weapon light, just a bigger overall setup. But again, I prefer a weapon light over like night sights or tritium night sights. So these will do, especially from the factory. They're great. I think they have a fiber optic option, but I like these. My eye just grabs the 3-dot better than a blacked out post or anything like that. So good sights from the factory. You could upgrade them if you want, but I don't really see any reason to. Okay, now let's talk about the linchpin in this whole thing. This being a hammered fired gun, you do have to be careful if you're going to dry fire it. So this roll pin here is a firing pin retaining pin. And what I have seen from other users is that if you dry fire this gun too much, you can break that pin. Now, Cajun Gunworks makes a replacement that is titanium, so I would recommend checking that out. And then also you can use snap caps or a little handy dandy trick that I found on one of the CZ forums, which is you take this little O-ring, insert it over the striker on the back, and then your hammer doesn't actually hit that striker or firing pin. Push it forward, it hits that O-ring. However, you get a regular or replicated trigger pull that's pretty much exactly the same. So I'll show you what that looks like. It's pretty cool. So I use this to dry fire. I also have some snap caps too. But I like just knowing that I'm not hitting it. It's not going to break this pin. I will eventually upgrade it, but for now, as long as I'm not hitting it, I'm using that O-ring. I don't really see a reason to do that. If you're going to dry fire a lot without them and you just want the peace of mind, Cajun Gunworks makes that replacement roll pin that you can slam in there. So overall, this is a great handgun. I'm loving it. It has so few little tiny minuscule issues with it. And it looks beautiful from the factory that you can just carry it in its standard configuration and feel confident. And again, I like the way that it looks. So I'm not making any modifications that would potentially get me in some type of trouble should I have to use the gun in a life or death situation. I know a lot of that's been debunked, but it is probably in your best interest that if you're going to carry a firearm, the closest to stock that you can carry it is probably the best. Just in case you get in a courtroom with some assholes that try to say that, oh, well, you had, this improvement to it, which makes it deadlier and this, that, and the other. So I think carrying a factory gun is probably a safe bet. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. This is just stuff you hear from the grapevine. Could be total bullshit, but it is confidence inspiring when you have something that's straight out of the box, looks good, runs good, and you're confident with. So check one out for yourself, the CZ P07 in 9mm. Can't say enough good things about this gun, guys. Thanks for watching, and keep shooting.